Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network, and you might even be watching it. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is 7/7/20. Well, we've seen these markets. They've been creeping up. Gold is creeping up to $1,800 the ounce. Silver has yet again broken $18. And, well, we've been burned so many times in the past 7-8 years. Gold is trading at 7.5-year highs. Is silver ever going to rise again? Well, our good friend David Morgan is with us. You find him over at themorganreport.com. And David, this appears to be the real deal.
Yes, it does, Kerry. First, thanks for having me back. It's always fun to be with you, and we have a pretty long history. I remember meeting the first time on the gold shows, and then you told me you're going to do this, and a lot of people talk as cheap, as my mom used to say, but it wasn't with you. You're a sincere man, and believe me, I know doing a startup isn't easy, but kudos on that. But back to silver. Yeah, I mean, we got to the 125 level, the highest gold-silver ratio in 5,500 years. I said that's probably it. It portends something not so good, which is probably the biggest disruption in the global economy ever recorded, and that's kind of where we're at least the way I see it. Further point is it's moved down. We're down to about 95 as we speak. Silver's touching on the 1850 level, which is kind of the first breakout point I want to see. I really want to see silver over 20 by the end of the year. I think it will happen. And I want to see that gold-silver ratio back to what used to be kind of the old high, which is 80 to 1. And I really want to see silver continue to outperform gold as it has of recent time, but from what level? From a 5,500-year level as far as time is concerned. So I'm still bullish. I think a couple of factors are going for silver that aren't going for gold. One is that silver's outside of the banking system. So the people have much more power on the silver side than they'll ever have on the gold side. On the confiscation question, I mean, if they confiscated all the silver in the world, it would be a spit in the ocean. Excuse the crude analogy, but it wouldn't do them any good. The only thing, if they took every silver ounce that exists and then moved it up by a factor of 1,000 or 10,000, it might do a little bit of good. It might pay off some of their interest on something for a couple of months. I mean, I really don't see it happening this time, but on gold, it could happen. I really doubt it. But in both cases, it wouldn't be the individual. They're not going to make an edict and say, turn it in. I just don't see that happening. I think the worst case is that they would go for the easy pickings, which would be the GLD and the
ETFs.
SLD, and it's sitting right there in a vault, and that's what they would grab. So I get that question all the time. I didn't ask it, but it's just been on my mind all weekend because over and over, because especially new people, they're very worried about, it's such a risky investment. And I just laugh because tell me one, monetary instrument that's lasted for 5,000 years. None, except the precious metals.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
How risky is that? It's probably, sorry to interrupt, it's going to be money for a long time, folks.
Yeah, I hear that also, the confiscation question, although this time as opposed to 11 when I started the show, there are a lot more newbies back in 11 than there are now, which is kind of giving me hope that we're on the cusp. One thing that John Rubino, our mutual friend, mentioned is that the RobinHood Traders, that's that platform. It's a free quote unquote trading platform for stocks. That because the gold stocks, the mining stocks have started to show momentum, the RobinHood traders, which I guess mostly are millennials and Gen Zers, have started to pick up on them, and they're starting to put money into them, which is kind of almost amusing when you think about it, David.
Yeah. Well, as you know, my age and how long I've been in the industry, and that's a little scary. It's not real surprising, but I am still convinced that when we get into the latter stages of this third leg up, which we've been in for some time now, once gold broke 1550, if you're technically oriented, 2-3 years out, when it goes really strongly parabolic and you see those $100 a day up moves in the gold market, I still believe, even with all the research you can get for free, people will just go totally to the emotional side, not look at any research, and they'll just buy anything that's cheap. So any, micro cap gold stock, silver stock, copper stock that's got gold, silver, at least in their name, it's going to be bought just because it's in their name. And I have to digress a bit. This came up recently on an interview that I did, but back when I was young and got into this industry, there was a stock on the American Stock Exchange. Back in those days, the amount of stocks that were listed on the Amex was probably 100. I mean, you could go through every stock. It was just barely a little strip in the LA Times. Anyway, there was like Golden Knight, I think the name of it was. Anyway, it doubled like instantly when gold was going from 600 to 800. And it was a women's lingerie company, So, I mean, just because it had the word gold in it, it skyrocketed.
Yeah, I did something stupid like that when I first started. I think I was 21 and got my first brokerage account. I was solar industry, solar panels, whatever. Everything was solar. And I think I bought a company, American Solar Industries. And of course, the stock went bankrupt within 15 minutes of me buying it.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with solar, unless maybe they made reflectors for people to use to get tans with. That was the only connection with solar energy that they had. And, the sheep are going to get sheared, and it's that simple.
Yeah.
Sad, but true. So when you're looking at the companies out there, obviously, this long period of down metals markets weeded out some of the questionable companies, but it didn't get rid of enough of them, did it?
Well, that's I wouldn't say it's conjecture. I mean, it's a subjective thing. I mean, we were talking off record before the show started that, my early days and how many micro cap companies in Vancouver we'll call them questionable, versus today, and how there's a lot less, but they still exist. And, the government, and I'm free market. I'm not like super pro government, but regardless, the point is that even though they enact the 43101 standard, that was a national instrument, NI 43101, which means that you basically are under scrutiny when you report, doesn't necessarily negate that there aren't some scoundrels out there. I mean, you can legislate honesty and everything else. Just because you're breaking the law doesn't prevent some of these, bad actors from doing so. So we're in a better situation as far as how many, but no, there's still people that were able to raise money on their story, and their story really isn't valid, but they can still raise money on it. And the other part of the coin, which I don't mind saying because it kind of woke me up, there's been a couple of cases in my 40 years of bad actors that hit good stuff. I mean, their intent wasn't honorable, but yet they got that drill out there and doggone it, they got lucky and found something.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to paint with a broad brush and say, bad actor, don't invest. You could have bad actor and the darn thing hits. So it's a tough game, Kerry. It really is.
Yeah, it's really tough. You got to have the right mindset when you get into this. I mean, look at that Chinese company, had 83 million ounces of gold, except that it wasn't really gold. And here they appeared to actually be holding it. So a measure of skepticism when you're investing in this sector is really key, paramount to survival.
Yeah, I think it's two things. I agree with you there, skepticism. And then, of course, it's also easily achieved. It is easily achieved by money management. Now, a lot of people don't do this, but I do. And that's kind of one of the main things about my report is how I teach to speculate, because speculation is different than investing. And we invest, but we also do some speculation. But if you do it as I teach, you're not going to get hurt very badly. And that's the main point, because the worst thing in the world, and I've been there, is watching gold make new highs every day, and you're holding on to this one big gold stock that you believe the story on, and it's not moving. That's so frustrating.
Oh, it's so true. So you got to diversify, obviously, right? I mean,
Yeah.
diversification is really key.
But yeah.
And what else? What
Well,
other
you got
things to
to
survive?
money management. The way I've done it and it's been very successful is big money in big companies, medium money in medium companies, and small money or money you can afford to lose in the speculations. And then if one of those speculations actually becomes a company, then I'll go ahead and pay up higher. Most people say, well, you don't buy a stock that was at 12 cents for $1.20. I go, yeah, if we could get all the metrics and they hit pay dirt and this thing's worth $20 and I can analyze that and sell it at $1.20, you bet I'll pay $1.20 for it. So we've done that a few times. And, going back, I don't want to make this too much about me, but I had a young guy with me from Vancouver. And he knew, every inside deal, all the scuttlebutt, all the coffee shop talk and all this. So he took his retirement direction, his whatever they're kind of RSVP or something. Anyway, and put them all in these penny juniors. And his wife's account was the mortgage report, basically by the book. So after a couple of years, her account was just cooking and his was going down. And he had the inside track. So you got to be careful when you speculate. You just don't want to put too much on a story stock or 10 story stocks. I mean, a lot of people play the micro cap game, have 100 stocks. And yeah, maybe they get that one that goes up 40 times. But if 30 of them go to zero, when you weight out how much you've gained, you might have been better in Franklin, Nevada, and writing calls on it and made 60% a year over year over year. I mean,
Or you could always go to Tesla, right? Right now, Tesla's all-time record high over $1,300, up $120 yesterday. Up 10% in a day, and you just think
it's the smallest actual manufacturer of automobiles as far as production.
Oh yeah, a few hundred,
the littlest company,
$500,000,
biggest market cap. I mean, that says everything about where the stock market is right now.
It's madness. I mean, it's the bellwether flavor of the day, right?
Right.
We've seen this, and God, you look at the charts.
Yeah.
You look at the 5-year chart, and you see exponential. It just reminds me of what Bitcoin looked like when Bitcoin peaked.
Yeah. And let me add, Kerry, this is exactly, and you set the scene perfectly, and it wasn't anticipated. I think that's where the golds are going to go. I think when this whole thing really starts to fall and the rush to gold, the run to gold starts, there's the old expression, there's no fever like gold fever. Yeah. So think about how overvalued Tesla is. Think about how overvalued gold could get. Now, I'm not forecasting that exactly. I'm doing more of a mindset here, where the mindset is I'm buying that, that 18-cent stock, and that thing's $1.80 a week later, and then that thing's $18 2 months later. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that might happen when this market really gets going. And again, I don't know. No one knows. So take the timing with a grain of salt. But, I think we're still 2-3 years out from that point. But my point, I hope, is well made, that there's no fever like gold fever. And you definitely want part of your holdings in the precious metals. You certainly don't have to dump in 50%, 40%, 90%, any of that.
I kind of avoided talking about what's going on in the world right now in terms of the global economic shutdown. And I would have expected gold and silver to go much higher. Not that they performed extremely well. When you look back to the crash lows of March 23rd, all the gold stocks and the metals not only recouped their losses from that time, from the crash, but they're trading many stocks at 52-week highs.
And new highs. Yeah.
I'm just surprised that they haven't gone higher. And I'm not being greedy here. Yeah. I'm not complaining. Don't get me wrong. I'm totally not complaining. I'm just saying what's tamping down the demand in the stock market coming back? What is it?
Well, let me seize that opportunity. I mean, it's kind of my job to figure these things out. Not that this is correct, but my analysis is, so if you go back to the last time gold was 1,800 and you look at what these stocks sold for, and you look at where they're at today when gold's at 1,800, they're pathetically undervalued from the last time we had $1,800 gold. And I think the reason for that is COVID, meaning that stocks are driven by earnings. And if these stocks couldn't have any earnings for March, April, May, and June, then that's going to be reflected in the share price. And I think that's really, it's that simple, Kerry.
Yeah. Well, that's a logical explanation. But the fact that we're not producing, well, for like 3 months, all the mines in the Western world were shut down. Who knows about China, but in the East. But certainly in the Western world, South America, Africa, they shut these places down.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you think that would make the price go a lot higher when there's no new supply coming onto the market? Could there be that much supply or that much volume in the supply chain to keep it going to now?
Yeah, it's gold stocks, and you can put silver in there with it, precious metal stocks, or even any mining company, even tin or aluminum, or it's very hard to analyze because they're hard to analyze in a normal market. But in a disruptive market, let's just do a thought experiment. All right, gold production is closed off for 1 year worldwide. Well, are those stocks worthless? No, because in normal, Coca-Cola or a dress shop or any retail, basically end of business, you're done. But not in the gold market, because now what you have to analyze is that XYZ Mining owns 4 million ounces of gold in the proven in the M&I, measured and indicated. So that meets the 43101 standard. So is that gold going away? No. It's actually in a safe. It's in Mother Earth. It's one of the best safes that exists. So now what do you analyze it? Will that stock go up? And I'd say in a big gold boom, it would, because it would be valued for stored gold. It'd be like buying a gold holding company in a way. So it's difficult for me to, come on your show, Kerry, and say, oh man, I got it all figured out, because I don't. But I am telling the truth. I mean, those stocks could exceed the gold price just because they're sitting on gold that's not being mined. Now, I don't think it'd go that far right now, but as I have often said, the market knows more than anybody. And if I saw the momentum and I saw the volume go and the price keeps going, and it's at a factor of, let's say, 2 to 1, stocks are outperforming gold, which would be very unlikely in that case, but let's say they are, because I said the market knows more than I do. Then I would say, look, we got to get back on, let's keep your gold stocks. Let's just put a stop underneath them as they keep rising and rising and rising. So very tough to, because you just objectively think about, it's out of business, basically. Well, not in this market, not when you've got an asset that's appreciating, that's being stored and doesn't rot, doesn't, what I'm saying? Yeah. It's basically vaulted in Mother Earth, not vaulted in the COMEX warehouse.
Yeah, well, it's definitely an interesting phenomena that especially with all the trillions of new currency units being created, the lack of stability in the financial system, the potential for collapse. It doesn't, the system was already weak before the pandemic shutdown occurred. Now it's only weaker. It hasn't gotten any stronger as a result of that. And you would think everybody in the world would be fleeing into gold and maybe cryptos, and you have something to say about that too, but yet it really hasn't happened. Do people, what do they need to see? Like a going out of business sale sign on the Federal Reserve? Is that what it's going to take?
Yeah, well, I think part of it has to do with the basic crushing of the global economy. So people that might have had, that $1,000 trading account or $2,000 trading account or whatever might have bought into gold, but they can't because they're not getting a paycheck and they're only getting a stimulus check. So I think a lot of that lower market is gone and it may never come back. I know the RobinHood thing we talked about before the show started exists. I'm not unaware of these things, but so I think part of it is just fear. Even with people that have their jobs, rather than buy gold, are sitting there looking at paying off debt or hoarding or saving cash. So I think it has more to do with the mindset of fear. And as John Exter showed so eloquently in the Upside Down Pyramid, where does it go? It goes to cash. It goes to dollars. That's where it goes. Then when they figure out their food prices have doubled in 6 months, then it starts going to gold because that cash isn't doing them much. Gold has doubled, food has doubled, the light bulb goes on, now the run to gold starts.
Okay. And if gold prices are going up, then on these, especially the juniors, but even the majors, and certainly the royalty stocks, they're going to go up even more because you got the leverage, right?
Oh, yeah.
The royalty companies, especially because they figured out how to take virtually all the risks out of mining.
Yeah.
And all the burdens, everything else, and just print money. Obviously, it was such a good business model. A lot of other companies, hedge funds jumped into it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're seeing that, hey, this thing could really take off, because if the price of silver doubles from here, say it's $36, then a lot of companies, near-term producers and producers, beginning producers, could see, their stock prices go up many, many multiples of 100%.
Yeah, and that's one way to actually determine the top of the market. And I just said one way, there's several, but a good gold company at the top of the market would be selling like 30 times earnings or something. And a good silver company was selling at 50 times earnings. So it's sort of a Coke Pepsi story. Of course, those are both colas. But anyway, silver sells at a higher multiple, just I think only because there's a bigger following in the silver market once things get going for the average person, whereas gold's more institutional, very wealthy families, that kind of thing. Not that some average people don't own gold, but I'm talking about is institutional money coming in there. Some will go into silver, but a lot will just stay in the gold market.
Yeah, silver is the way I look at it, it's like steak. When the price of steak, you go into the butcher now, aged prime steak, it's $20-$25 a pound.
Yeah.
And at that point, you look in the case and you see, well, chicken's only $3.50 a pound. I can load up on a lot of chicken, and that's, an analogy between gold and silver. And that's what it's going to take for the individuals to get into this, which eventually they will get into it. Hopefully it won't be too late. If it is, then it is. We've seen that story unfold too many times before in the past. So you mentioned you're involved in a silver crypto, David?
Yeah, there's one that was after the Vancouver show, I guess 3 years ago. It's AG for the symbol for silver, AG.load, LODE.ONE. Folks, you can have almost any URL these days. That's the legit URL. So it's AG.LODE.ONE. It's a cryptocurrency backed by silver, now gold. They just added gold to the mix 3 months ago. And the big news is that there is a European bank that's going to put in 10 million euros to basically get this project to the next level. And if you want to know more, I don't want to bore everybody, but if you get on my free mail list, and I know a lot of your listeners are, at themorganreport.com, right on that landing page, just give me a first name and an email address, because I've been talking about it almost daily here for the last week and a half. There's an opportunity, if you want, to take this kind of risk, and I'd certainly say put it in the high risk category, but also make it part of your position where you could get basically digitized silver. And the other part that I really like, and it hasn't manifested yet, but is I think about 2-3 months out, they will have a debit card backed by your holdings on the program, which is what really, for guys like me, even though I'm fairly adept with technology, but it's just something that's easier
the holy
to have
grail
a card issued that I could go to a restaurant or the airlines or the gas station or the grocery store, and I know I'm spending my silver, but they don't, and not and it just works so easily for me to have it in that form.
Yeah, and then when silver goes up, presumably faster than the rate of inflation, your purchasing power on that card goes up.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about.
And the transaction fees are extremely low.
Yeah. So, in fact, if you don't mind me giving a little quick one
please.
On this load. So there's a guy in the UK, he's a pretty big fan, and he bought 2 silver manifestos from me. And, you know, it's always kind of a bit hassle to go from US to British pounds and get it changed over and blah, 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 blah. Well, he's on this, on the AGX platform, and he let me know that. So, or one of the guys on AGX connected us. So he did a transaction for the books instantly, and there's no, you know, currency exchange, none of this stuff. And it happened so darn fast. And I want to make the further point that you just made. The transaction cost of doing that was almost zero. It was so small. Whereas if I had to do like a Western Union or a bank wire or any of this other nonsense that exists now, I should say nonsense, but all the existing methods, I would have paid dearly to do that.
That's pretty cool, I have to say. And that is one of the things, it's always been hooking this thing up to a debit card, whether it's cryptos or anything else. They've always said they're on the verge of doing it. They never do it, or if they do it, there's always a problem, right?
Yeah.
There's always a problem.
I had an e-gold card way back. For most of your listeners won't even know that. You can look it up. I think it was e-gold. And I'm smart and I'm dumb. But, you know, usually I'm thinking I've been burned enough times. So I just did it a little bit. I put like $100 on it or $50 and got the card, went out and bought gas, and it worked fine. So I put a little bit more, but I didn't go hog wild, right? Because as you said, if you put gold in it, it's $300 an ounce. And that's about when this thing started. When gold's at $1,800 an ounce, your gas is pretty cheap. But I didn't want to go too far. So I think I put another $100 on it.
You were wary.
And I was wary. And I don't think they did anything wrong. This is my bias. And, you know, it's been so long since I read the case against them. But they went out of business. And then there's been, I think this Glint thing has gone out of business. And there's been a few of them. So, you know, I say it, and I'm trying to caution people, but the thing about Load that, of course, again, I'm in it. So, you know, take this as a cautionary statement, people, is they went through Liechtenstein and they've done everything by regulation A, regulation B, regulation Z. I mean, they've gone through reg. So this thing has met every regulation that exists in the cryptocurrency world right now. And many of these that have fallen by the wayside have not. And I think that's a big plus for this program. And yes, it costs. It costs a lot. It costs, you know, fiat, and it costs intellectual, property. I mean, you got to have the right lawyers talking to the right lawyers to get this thing going correctly. But so far, so good. I don't want to set my whole reputation on it, but it's been 3 years in the making. It looks like we're right at the cusp of the final step. And if we get that debit card, I'll say if, not when, but I think it will happen, then we're going to be one of the first. And once that takes place, it's going to appeal to a lot of folks.
All right. Well, hey, we appreciate the update on that. So just give us the URL again.
ag.load.1.
All right. We got it. And David, it's always a pleasure having you on. Go check out David's work at themorganreport.com. Sign up for his free newsletter and go to our site, sign up for our free newsletter too, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. David, we'll be catching up with you. Hopefully we'll have live conferences again one day soon. And maybe we'll be seeing you in Vancouver in January.
Excellent, Kerry. Thanks so much. It was fun.